Hi guys, so today's video is a direct continuation of the previous one. I apologize for the huge gap in between, so you might want to refresh your memory and watch the end of the previous one. So I ended with me handing in my, what is on the lens? Sorry. I ended with me handing in my 2 weeks notice at the after school program where I was working as a one-to-one support. So I'll pick up from there. So I handed in my notice at that place, and then with that commitment gone, the daycare where I supplied at was able to give me a lot more hours because previously they had to work around my other commitment. Now they were able to give me full 8-hour shifts, and I started getting a lot of work. I think I worked like a solid month in the baby room. They were having a lot of turnover, which I couldn't figure out why at that time. But I was very happy to work in the infant room. And I went to the other nursery school a few times still, here and there in the mornings, but they didn't need me that often because it was a small program. So for a few months, I was doing those two things, and everything was going well. And the reason that I didn't look for more work or try to get full permanent at that daycare or what have you, was because I was planning, if I'm looking down a lot, because I have notes, I was planning on going back to school. So you might remember me when I talked about my high school co-op placement in the group homes. The staff there have a diploma called DSW, Developmental Service Worker. I had thought they were saying PSW, right? So when I was thinking about going back to school, I was thinking special needs. I was thinking, maybe I shouldn't have done ECE, because as I discussed, it was kind of a whim. And I think I kind of finished it to prove the teacher wrong more than anything. So I was thinking maybe I should go back to school. So I Googled PSW, which turns out to be Personal Support Worker. And first I was excited because I saw, oh my God, it's only a 2-semester program. Then I realized that it wasn't the same thing, and that's how I discovered DSWs. PSWs in Canada mostly work with the elderly in old age homes, but I did some digging because when I first came across that, I was like, I don't want to do that. But then I did some digging just to see if it was worth my while, and I discovered some organizations love the ECE PSW combination for children with medical needs. And I was like, this is 100% up my alley. It's a 2-semester program. I'm going to do this. And I started looking around, and I don't remember why, but I was hell bent on having a summer semester start date. Summer semester would be May. For some reason that I don't remember, I didn't want to wait till September to start. But none of the colleges in the Toronto area or Southern Ontario had a May start. But I found in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, which is about 8-hour drive from Toronto, they had a May start. And I looked at their program, and each semester was 4 courses and a placement. And when I did my ECE, each semester I did 3 or 4 courses and a placement. So I thought, oh my God, this is so perfect. I can handle this. And I was excited to live alone and get, that experience. So I went ahead and applied for it. I got accepted. And I gave in my notice at the nursery school and the daycare that after April I wouldn't no longer be available to supply. And I headed up to Sault Ste. Marie. And I had all these goals in mind of where I was going to work afterwards, and yeah, it was a disaster. I was up there about a week, I guess. By day 3, I think I got there on a Sunday, or I got there on the weekend, so I think it was Wednesday I was ready to go home. There were a couple of factors. One was the way they had the program set up, was you were in placement 1 day a week, and 2 days a week you had classes. So that meant that 4 days a week I had, spare time. And this was in a small town, much smaller than what I'm used to. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have a ton of money or transportation to go out and do things. Sitting alone in my room in residence was extremely depressing. And the residence building itself was extremely depressing. It looked like a prison. It was cinder blocks, walls, I kid you not. It was very depressing, so that was one thing. And the other thing, well, there were two other things actually. The second thing was the course loads. Even though it was only 4 courses, each course was ridiculously heavy. Like I was panicking looking at the syllabuses, or syllabi, I guess. And the final decision, I knew that PSWs mostly work with the elderly. But like I said, there are other places that'll use them for children. So I had hoped I'd be able to do my placement with children. Up where I was, maybe because it's a small town with not a lot of specialized services like that, you had to do your placement with the elderly. And I knew there was no way I could handle that. Um, I wouldn't have the social skills to deal with the patients. I think emotionally I would get upset. I couldn't deal with it. So I decided the program was not for me, and I got on a Greyhound bus and arrived back in Toronto. Unfortunately, I was able to get all my money back because I dropped out so quickly. I even got my residence money back, so it was no skin off my nose at the end, and it was an experience. And yeah, I guess nothing bad came of it. I guess I don't really regret it. So when I got back down here, my the supervisor at the daycare where I was supplying, she said she would take me back. I never did ask at the nursery school. I guess I was embarrassed for some reason. But the daycare supervisor said she would take me back. And I was thinking, good, I get lots of work again, like I had before I went up. But the staff turnover had settled down considerably since she started offering benefits, extended health benefits, like stuff the government health doesn't cover, for non-Canadian listeners or watchers, viewers. So she was barely using me, so I wasn't making any money. So I started looking for work, and I went in a few different directions. I had a friend. Sorry, I have notes here. I had a friend at the time, who I'm no longer friends with, who was working as what's called an ECA. ECA stands for Early Childhood Assistant. I didn't know that was a thing until after I was done my diploma. Some ECAs do have a certificate. Some have no educational background, and they still get hired in childcare, and it's a bit messed up because most centers, it seems, in my experience, use the ECAs the same way, same responsibility as the ECEs. Although I have run into a few where the ECAs don't do programming, don't do observation, so there's less stress and responsibility on you. So I was looking for things like that. I started looking at just at any random daycare in my neighborhood that had an ECA position. I remember I threw resumes at probably 4 places for ECA. Most of them didn't even get back to me. I think maybe because I was overqualified. And the one that did, unfortunately, did not hire me. It was a very nice center. And I learned a lesson that day. I didn't check I thought I checked the address before I left the house. I didn't have data on my phone at the time. So I ended up having to call my brother to Google the address, and I don't know how I made it to that interview. It was a nice center. Unfortunately, I didn't get the job. So I started, sending resumes further. So with the ECE in mind, a couple interviews stick out in my mind. One lady was a complete airhead, and I knew I would not work for her even if she had hired me. And similarly, I had one lady who was extremely insulting. And again, I knew I wouldn't work for her if she had hired me. And I was getting really frustrated. I'm a qualified ECE, you know. No one's giving me feedback. Most people aren't even biting. And I guess this is similar to what a lot of people go through. Not just people with Asperger's, but I think it probably compounds it. I don't think I interview well. I think people need to see me work. So I started branching out. I found a website called care.com, which is basically people looking for babysitters or nannies. What I can remember, I had 3 interviews from there. 2 I actually went to people's houses for, which is a little odd, because these are just random schmoes on the internet. It is scary, to be honest. One lady I met at a mall. and we kept missing each other. And I think it was 2 or 3 attempts before I finally met her, and I never heard back. So I never got anything out of Care.com. Uh, Anything else notable? Oh, a couple other notable attempts I made at getting work. I started going beyond childcare and looking for any random job. And I even applied at a grocery store. They were looking for someone to collect shopping carts from the parking lot. That's that's what I was getting for like any job. I went to the interview and she started asking me about cutting vegetables, and I'm not gonna lie and say I have experience with large knives when I don't. So I didn't get that job either, which is annoying because they advertised for basically a cart pusher, which I could have done. Um, Also, the interviewer reminded me of my grandma a lot. It was weird. Um, I guess the last attempt before I finally got hired somewhere, I was on Kijiji, and I saw someone looking for someone to work in a home daycare, and I traveled a fair distance for this interview. I thought the interview went fine. She asked me to come back the next day for basically a trial. So I traveled again quite a far distance in a very bad rainstorm as well. I did this trial, did not hear a word back from this woman. I sent her emails, etc. And it's like, if you don't want to hire me, fine, don't hire me. But at least say thank you for coming. At least acknowledge my effort. That was very, very frustrating. And then, after all this, my worker, you'll remember in late 2012, excuse me, I opened a file with an employment support provider, worker, whatever, and she came out of the woodwork in the fall of 2014, just as the file was like almost ready to close. She came out of the woodwork and suggested a job. Oh, sorry. There's one thing I missed, and I'll get back to where I just was. My brother is a registered massage therapist, and when he was living at home, he had a lot of laundry to do, sheets from his clients. So at one point, I was so desperate for money that I actually would wash and dry and fold his sheets for him, and he would pay me a small amount of money. So yeah, summer 2014 was interesting, and frustrating and broke. So, oops, why am I checking that off? Sorry. So yeah, so my worker came out of the woodwork and suggested a job for me. The place was called Nursery Support Services. Um, Oops, pretend you didn't hear that. I'm not redoing the whole video of this far in. I'm not supposed. I said I wouldn't name employer, so you didn't hear that. So this agency is basically supply teachers. Oh, my glasses. I don't like them tight, so that. But when I don't get them tightened, I'm picking them up all the time. But it's a sensory thing. I don't want them tight on my face. So anyway, this agency is like supply teachers for daycares. They send you as needed. They'll call you in the evening or early morning with an assignment, and you'll go. They cover pretty much anywhere in Toronto. Or you're allowed to limit it. I'm not going to spend 2.5 hours on a bus to get to the edge of Toronto. You're allowed to limit your areas. And they hired me, and I worked successfully with them for 10 months. I could have worked with them a lot longer if my employment worker hadn't come out of the woodwork, a month and a half before the file was due to close. So that's unfortunate, but I can't undo. I made a very good friend at the after school program who maybe I would not have met if I'd been with this company. So maybe that's a positive. But yeah, so I worked for them successfully for 10 months. And it's odd because you would think for someone with Asperger's, having a job where there's no routine, or little routine, little or minimal predictability, would be extremely anxiety inducing. For me, this is a good example of how I'm Emily, I'm not Asperger's. My personality, I take after my mom, is I like novelty and I do get bored easily. And then my autism rears its head, and it makes me also crave sameness and routine. But I guess they sort of, battle each other out a little bit sometimes. Like my bedroom rarely changes. It's comforting for me to walk in every night and see everything look the same. But then in my day-to-day life, I do get bored doing the same thing over and over and over. So it was nice to see different parts of the city, see how different centers did things. And then there was also the advantages of socially, when they don't really know you, you can just sit quietly in the staff room and eat your lunch. And the conversation is not going to go if they talk to you at all. Because sometimes they have their own little groups formed and they're doing their own thing. But if they talk to you, it doesn't go beyond small talk. Parents aren't expecting much. They might ask you how so and so do today, but they know you're a supply. They're not expecting big, huge reports out of you. Some supervisors, it depends on the supervisor's personality. Some expect a lot out of you. Some do go easier on you because you're a supply. Plus, there's no staff meetings, no programming, no observations. So I was getting to do what I wanted to do when I went into ECE, which was basically take care of kids without all the other baggage that comes with working in childcare. I was with them for 10 months, and I did get frustrated at times because one morning I'm starting at 7 a.m., next morning I'm starting at 10 a.m. Then there's no jobs for me the next day. I did get frustrated at times, and I did start noticing I was having issues with fatigue that I'd never had before. And I guess it'd be early 2015. They sent me somewhere, it was 8 hours a day every day for 3 weeks. Someone was on vacation. And I think I lasted about halfway through, and I'm like, I'm too exhausted. That was the first time, because I'd worked full days at summer camps in the past. So that was sort of my first experience with fatigue debilitating me. But they actually were happy to have someone who would take short hours and weird jobs. Because a lot of people, like I would take after school jobs that were 3 hours long because it would be an easier day for me. A lot of people don't want that because they need every penny they can get from this job. Whereas I had, as long as I worked X number of hours a month, I could survive with that income plus my benefit. I didn't have to work every day, all day like other people. So I think they actually liked that. They could use me for those odder jobs, and I was quite happy with them. And in retrospect, I probably should have stayed with them, although now I probably wouldn't be with them because of other problems that have arisen. But what ended up happening, and I'm going to wrap up here, I ended up getting hired permanently by one of the centers that they sent me to many, many times. The supervisor saw me working. I don't interview well. If you ask me for an example of how I would do something, I will go, But she saw me working, and apparently she would actually even request me from the agency. So when they had an opening, I jumped on it because it would eliminate, sometimes I got frustrated, like I said, about a lack of routine. This job was the same hours every day. And the biggest reason I jumped on it was the hours were 1 a.m. to 6 p.m. That does not exist in most childcare centers. Either you're working an 8-hour shift or you're with the school age kids before and after. Whereas this center was a little bit unusual. Their school age staff would work longer hours. I would come in at 1, from 1 to 2. I'd be in a preschool room covering a break. Then I had a half an hour break until 2:30, and then 2:30 to 3:30 was our meeting and prep time. And then from 3:30 to 6, I was with the kids. So the hours were great for me, which you won't get in many childcare centers. So I thought it would go really well. I thought I'd be there for years. I thought everything was going to be fantastic. I was there about 3.5 months, and I will talk all about that in my next video because it is the perfect example of Asperger's in the workplace and of how we struggle. So thank you for putting up with me through this sort of filler video. The next video I think should be quite telling. Thank you.